So, I was watching an Atheist Experience clip, and someone in the comments section got upset that Matt Dillahunty talked about the concept of misgendering someone as though that was a thing, and things went on from there. And I really wanted to address a couple of concepts that came out of this because I think that they're worth talking about. This guy went on to trumpet free speech. Why not just throw out the First Amendment while you're at it? And talk about laws that will ostensibly remove the ability to misgender someone. Spoilers, none of them do. So there are three basic points that this comes down to in terms of what I'm going to talk about. The first, he said, like a lot of other people said, that he was going to call people what he deemed they actually were. The second is that he called being trans a disorder because that's what it used to be called by the medical community, and so apparently we shouldn't cater to trans people because we don't cater to other disorders, I guess. I don't know. And the third was the suicide rate amongst trans individuals, citing a 40% figure. And because I am perpetually disorganized, I'm going to go after the middle one first. Okay, so for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to assume that his stance is correct. The medical community calls it a disorder, so it's a disorder to be transgender. The proper diagnosis is gender identity disorder, not gender dysphoria. And I don't only understand why this is a thorny issue, but I'm going to be getting into at least part of it momentarily, so just have a seat. In the meanwhile, we've accepted the premise that transgender people are suffering from a disorder. Now what? What actually changes here? What actually changes here for the people claiming that being transgender is a disorder? Because even when it was treated as a disorder by the DSM and by a large chunk of the medical community, what was the treatment? And that's kind of an important thing because this guy actually came back and he used the example of schizophrenia. What do you do in the case of schizophrenia? Well, in the case of schizophrenia, I would probably follow medical advice. Well, what does the medical advice say about transgender individuals? What did it say 2 decades ago? Well, the medical consensus for a long time has been transition. And transition's kind of a catch-all term, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing right now. But it can be anything from social to hormonal to actually surgical. And that is generally between the person who is transitioning and the medical community, their doctors or whoever. And this is an interesting distinction to me because this is somebody who is appealing to the medical community for treatment of schizophrenics because he didn't go for witchcraft treatments or, leeches and incense or chakras. He didn't go for spirit science. He went for the medical option, except he's ignoring it in this other case because this is an important thing. This is something that does affect one group of people, us. There was a debate as to whether or not trans individuals should actually have any sort of DSM-related diagnosis this time around. Gender identity disorder was out, but should something replace it? And part of the reasoning for why they decided yes was actually more because otherwise treatment would be relatively impossible for a good number of people. There was a fear that without a DSM diagnosis, insurance companies would stop covering transition-related medical care, and even that medical providers might stop providing care, period, especially considering that there might be associated liabilities that went along with it. And while that's important, that's not the important point to this video. The reason that this was a debate in the first place is because over the last couple of decades, the medical community has started to depathologize the idea of transgender individuals. And once they started doing that, once they started looking at trans individuals as something other than mentally ill, they discovered something. And this is fucking important. You see that 40% statistic? is massively skewed towards a certain body of trans individuals. Closeted trans people who are denied or unable to transition, who are isolated from the community around them. The numbers start to go way, way down when you start talking about people who can openly transition and have acceptance within their community or support from friends and family. And this is the part that a lot of people simply don't want to hear. There is nothing wrong with being transgender. The problem is, the reason there's such a high suicide rate, the distress that a lot of us feel comes specifically from the treatment, the isolation, the associated issues. Which brings me both back to the first point and continuing this one. Yes, people have the right to be assholes. Yes, you can call people what you want. Yes, you can run around misgendering people and getting offended when people call you a transphobe. You have that power. I can't stop you. But it is disingenuous to bring up that 40% statistic when you're contributing to the exact factors that cause this. You're making it harder for an entire group of people to live, and then you're asking, why are you killing yourselves? Well, that's a little fucked up. It actually sounds an awful lot like the old cliche of the bully punching somebody with their own fist and asking, why are you hitting yourself? And if you really want to go the mental illness route, then you've basically announced that you're not only attacking people who you have deemed to be mentally ill, but you're also denying us the medically approved treatment, the treatment that the medical and, yes, scientific communities have deemed is appropriate because other methods don't work. How's that for logical?